CSS has 4 types of pseudo element selectors that help keep our markup cleaner because they can target virtual elements that are not defined in the markup and do not appear in the source code. In this lesson, we'll start with the first line and first letter pseudo elements, which let us target the first line of text and the very first character in a sentence. One of the easiest ways to remember the difference between pseudo-classes and pseudo-elements is pseudo-classes target actual elements that describe a certain state, while pseudo-elements let us style certain parts of a document that don't always exist as elements or we can't really target with a simple selector. Now, you might see pseudo-elements written with double colons instead of just one. Well, they both work exactly the same way. The double colon syntax is simply used to distinguish between pseudo-classes and pseudo-elements. So here we'll be using the double colon syntax. In the HTML file I have set up here, we have a single paragraph element. Even though the first line of this paragraph does not have any HTML tags around it, as we can see here in the markup, we're still able to format it with pseudo elements. I've added the class intro to the paragraph. So in our style.css file, we'll create our pseudo element by writing the class intro first, followed by 2 colons, then first dash line. Now, make sure there aren't any spaces between the intro class and the first line pseudo element. So in our first line rule, we'll go ahead and add a few CSS properties. We'll first add a color property with the value royal blue. We'll then follow that with a font weight property and the value bold. Finally, a font size of 32 pixels. So I'll go ahead and save our style sheet. And in the browser, when we refresh, we can see how the first line of our paragraph is styled with the new properties we declared. And as we can see, the first line pseudo element will always select the first line of text rendered by the browser. The amount of text on the first line depends on how the text is rendered based on the font size and line width we set. We can get more specific than that with the first letter pseudo element. First letter will actually select the very first character or letter of the first line of text. First letter is commonly used for creating typographical effects like drop caps, where the first letter of a paragraph is enlarged to drop down 2 or more lines. So let's go ahead and select the first letter of our paragraph. Again, in our style sheet, we'll start with the intro class, followed by 2 colons, and this time we'll type first dash letter. Inside the rule, I'll go ahead and add a few CSS properties to make our first letter look like a drop cap. So I will start with the float property, value left, then I will apply some margin, followed by a little bit of padding, then a background property with a light gray value, then a font size of 100 pixels, so it's really big, and we'll finally give it a line height of 1. Now, don't worry if you do not understand any of these CSS properties just yet. As I mentioned earlier, we'll cover all of these properties in upcoming videos. For now, you'll just need to know that these properties will be applied to the first letter of our paragraph. Okay, so we will save our style sheet and review it in the browser. When we click refresh, we see the new styles are applied only to the first letter of our paragraph, which now looks very similar to a drop cap.